So good evening. My name is Jake Morrill, and on behalf of the Murray Bowen Archives Project, I'd like to welcome you to the 5th annual webinar on what would have been Murray Bowen's 111th birthday. In a moment, I'll let you know more of what you can expect this evening. But before that, TMBAP Director of Operations, Elise Steenberg, has some logistical information for how things will go. Elise?
Thank you, Jake. Hi, everyone. So yes, my name is Elise, and I am the Director of Operations with the Murray Bowen Archives Project. We ask everyone to please keep yourselves muted this evening throughout the duration of the presentation. However, you are encouraged to submit your questions throughout the presentation to our moderator, Libby Malone, Dr. Libby Malone, in the chat, who will then curate them and conduct the question and answer with the presenters at the end. If you have any technical issues, please chat or email me at info@murraybowenarchives.org. A link to the recording will be emailed to all registrants after the event. Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. You are looking at pictures of the illustrious board of the Murray Bowen Archives Project. This is both to acknowledge the people who put a lot of work and time into various dimensions of continuing and strengthening the mission of TMBAP, and it is also to let you know who you can be in touch with any questions or conversation you'd like to have about the work, including any potential part you might play in supporting it. TMBAP is in an important moment in its history. Each year, as well as an opportunity to engage some dimension of Bowen theory, this annual webinar is an opportunity for leaders in TMBAP to communicate to you, the broader network of stakeholders, about the mission and developments in the organization. This evening, you'll hear from 4 presenters. First, Priscilla Friesen will present an overview of the entire archives using the metaphor of a quilt. After that, Amie Post will present her findings and reflections from focusing on one particular square of the quilt, the Georgetown Family Center. Then Randy Frost will speak briefly in response in his role as director of the Bowen Center. And finally, Kent Webb will share updates and information regarding the ongoing work of the Murray Bowen Archives Project itself. When all presentations have concluded, as Elise Steenberg mentioned, Libby Malone will facilitate conversation based on the questions you have submitted throughout regarding what you're hearing from the presenters. So with thanks to all who've put time into making this evening's program possible, Priscilla, I'll pass it to you.
Good evening. I have a quilt hanging in my home that my mother created. It is made from blue jeans from my brother and myself. It includes pieces of my mother's clothing. It includes her abstract embroidery. The pieces are 4 by 4-inch squares, an easy size to work with on the long car rides, first from Ohio to Minnesota and back, then from Ohio to Oklahoma and back, for the funerals of my maternal and paternal grandmothers within a week of each other, July of 1967. 3 months later, her cancer recurred. The next series of squares are bleak images of winter created during her cancer treatments. This quilt tells a story of a time frame of personal experience of a family as a whole. So my question is, how do you describe the Murray Bowen Archives as a whole? And to look at pieces or parts of the collection as unique contributions to the whole, like my mother's quilt. This year, the focus of the webinar is to present the big picture of the archives and to highlight one part of the collection, the Georgetown Family Center. The image of the quilt gives you a sense of how the individual pieces of the archives, just as in a quilt, are stitched together to make a whole. The individual pieces are unique in shape, color, texture, yet the whole transforms beyond any of the individual pieces. It also demonstrates the beauty or uniqueness that every individual piece contributes to the whole. The purpose of this webinar is to shine a light on one quilt piece, the Georgetown Family Center, to highlight its unique contribution to the whole of the Murray Bowen archives. Dr. Joanne Bowen comes to her perspective through her professional work. She's a historical and zooarchaeologist, a research professor in anthropology, and an archivist for the Bowen family collection. At the 2017 monthly professional meeting at the Bowen Center, Dr. Joanne Bowen described, quote, an archival approach to preserving Dr. Bowen's legacy, unquote. In a personal exchange with her, Dr. Joanne Bowen described her approach in considering the, quote, legacy as a whole, as a research approach. Not as an archivist, she says. They think in boxes. Even most historians don't think like this. Documents are specific, and any piece of evidence can be used however a historian wants. One cannot do this. It only proves what the writer wants to prove, unquote. Her approach is more akin to an archaeologist who must grapple with stuff from the earth, objects, and scientific data. The challenge is to integrate disparate pieces of evidence. What does the integration say? Invariably, something no one individual database can say on its own. This translates to the Bowen archives. Each category, each type of video record and written record portrays a part of his history, a phase of his life. History will know Murray Bowen's thinking only through what survives. This perspective guides the work of the Murray Bowen Archives Project, including the importance of each piece of data to contribute to a more accurate whole. This evening, I will highlight some of the pieces of this archives quilt, describing the different kinds of materials in the collection, as well as materials representing different chronological time periods of Murray Bowen's life and what they uniquely contribute to the whole. While Bowen published only 2 books, he was a prolific writer. His writing is reflected in extensive correspondence, both professional and with his family. His writing routine was to get up early, 2 or 3 in the morning, and write until his early appointments began at 7 a.m. He maintained correspondence with patients, colleagues, and friends all over the course of his entire lifetime. One grouping of these letters includes the family letters. Beginning in the Menninger period through the end of his life, Dr. Bowen sent an onion-skin copy of a letter to 10 or more members of his family at a time, his parents, his siblings, and his children, recording his day-to-day thoughts about the facts of the family and his work. He used the letters to summarize professional meetings he attended, describing what he saw as important, and he described his reactions to events in the country and in the world. The family letters are one of the tangible examples of how Dr. Bowen integrated his family and his professional life. These letters are quintessential reflection of his way of being. There are many examples of his professional writing efforts. There are copies of manuscripts in all stages of writing and editing process. So what was left in? What was changed? How did his thinking change through the course of writing? These manuscripts illustrate his writing and thinking process. Dr. Bowen's or his clinical work used the latest technology at the time to record his work. The archives include some of the earliest audio tapes from the NIMH period, where a recorder was placed in the center of the common space, recording the activities of the day. In the 1970s, Bowen developed a project at the Medical College of Virginia, where his multiple family therapy model, where he engaged with an individual family group, while other groups watched and learned from each other. This project included opening the learning environment to include professionals. Both professionals and family members were in the group observing families on tape. This complex integrated learning environment was the beginning of the present-day clinical conference series at the Bowen Center. These sessions were recorded from 1970 to 1990. There are also tapes of Dr. Bowen presenting at meetings recorded from around the country. There are tapes of Bowen teaching in the postgraduate program, as well as of meetings held at the Georgetown Family Center, both think tank meetings and organizational meetings. This is a rich arena to see Bowen in action, both in clinical work, in teaching, and as the leader of the Georgetown Family Center. The chalkboard highlights the family diagram, or the graphic representation of the family system. It also demonstrates his teaching method that includes illustrating the theory through drawing on the chalkboard. Another artifact is his medical bag that is full of all required to be a country doctor. These artifacts are being preserved for donation to a museum. The Bowen family donation includes the photographs from the family history in Waverly, Tennessee, as well as photographs that document Bowen's life experiences. This includes in college, in medical school, residencies, experience in World War II, psychiatric residencies, Menninger and NIMH. The family generously includes these photographs in the archive collection. In addition, Andrea Shera's deed of gift includes all the professional photographs she took in her association at the Georgetown Family Center from 1975 to 1990, including in her position as audiovisual coordinator. This includes professional meetings, social gatherings at the Bowen Center, and in her travels with Bowen. The clinical records exist from the Menninger time period through NIMH to the end of his life. These records highlight his unique way of engaging families, and his clinical records changed over time with the development of the theory. Clinical records hold a challenge in today's environment of privacy. Dr. Bowen's records include theoretical descriptions relating to a particular person's life. Without personal identification, they are important contributions to understanding theory. TMBAP is working to develop ways to make materials available for research while protecting privacy. Now, not all of the time periods in the archive are in the graphic of the quilt. Each of the time periods of Bowen's life would have a quilt piece. For this presentation, I will focus on 4. The medical school at the University of Tennessee includes his initial interest to develop a mechanical heart. He was drawn to problems that needed to be solved. His eventual professional focus developed most significantly from his experience in World War II. He observed soldiers' response to being in the war. The psychological and emotional nature of the human got his attention. In post-World War II, and after a psychiatric residency in Bellevue Hospital, Dr. Bowen joined the first training class in the of psychoanalysis in the Menninger Foundation in Topeka, Kansas. It was an exciting and stimulating time for Dr. Bowen and the field of psychiatry worldwide. This period challenged Bowen's thinking of how psychoanalysis could be a science. The first fruits of understanding the human as part of evolution was confirmed during this time frame. NIMH. The Bowens moved from Kansas to NIMH to develop his research of relationships, hospitalizing entire family groups to study the family as a unit. This is the period of time Catherine Rocco's book highlights. Her book is an example of framing the importance of a time period or a quilt piece in the development of Dr. Bowen's theory. G. Mary Bourne's collection includes audio tapes and transcriptions of Bowen's participation in a training program at the Minnesota Institute of Family Dynamics, 1981 to 1988. In this last decade of Dr. Bowen's life, he described his experience in Minnesota as a time for him to integrate and to extend his theory in ways that he sometimes found limiting in his position at Georgetown Family Center. This speaks to the emotional constraints on creative exploration that are part of any human experience. We have a window into this unique series. Ms. Bourne published in 2 chapters in Bringing Systems Thinking to Life, edited by White and Bregman. These chapters are transcriptions from this series with comments by Ms. Bourne. We are thankful to Louisa Cannon, Ms. Bourne's daughter, for donating this series to NLM. So after leaving the NIMH in 1959, Bowen became faculty at the Georgetown University Medical Center. It was also during this time that the family theory field was emerging nationally and internationally. At Georgetown, he engaged professionals, psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals, developing training programs and symposia for the expansion of the theory. This collection reflects the time period from 1959 to 1990, the evolution of family therapy and Dr. Bowen's place in it. In 1975, the Georgetown University Family Center moved into its own space on MacArthur Boulevard. This was the organization founded and directed by Dr. Bowen with a core faculty. The importance of this collection is that it documents an organization that considered Bowen theory and the principle of differentiation of self as central to its decisions as principles that guided the organization. The archival materials reflect the organization as a natural system. Amie Post has been working to organize this collection in preparation for processing. Ms. Post is on the Bowen Center faculty and is a board member, as well as a TMBAP board member. We're privileged to have Ms. Post highlight her work with the Bowen Center materials. Amie, what are you learning from this collection?
Good evening and happy birthday to Dr. Bowen. Cheers. Nice to be with you all and to begin to describe the journey I've been on. I'm Amie Post, age 51, a firstborn daughter, an oldest sister of sister and brothers, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, not quite sure how that happened, a colleague, a friend, a student, and for some a teacher. In all these roles, a work in progress. And I serve on the Murray Bowen Archives Project Board since 2020. I'm also on the faculty and the board of directors at the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family. My efforts with the archives materials housed at the Bowen Center have responsibility to each of these organizations specifically, and more broadly to other students of Bowen theory in the present and in the future. This is my way of respecting the legacy I've inherited and doing my part to make it available to the future. This presentation is my best thinking and doesn't represent an official position of any organization. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the materials that are living at the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family that were generated by Dr. Bowen and his colleagues and students when the outfit, known as the Georgetown Family Center. The Bowen Center also contains materials that represent the work of Dr. Bowen's students who've contributed to the ongoing preservation, engagement, and development of Bowen theory after Dr. Bowen's death in 1990. The total collection is currently housed at 4400 MacArthur Boulevard in Washington, D.C. And while the Bowen Center sold the property in November 2023, it ingeniously determined to rent back space from the new owners. The space provides a continued physical space for the archive collection, and it serves other important functions for the Bowen Center. I am grateful to Randy Frost and Ann McKnight for supporting the investment of resources to sustain the preservation of the materials and provide time and space for thoughtful planning for the future. So as the adventure unfolds, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project and how it was tackled and who was involved. I'll describe some of the principles that guided the process, and then I'll give you an overview of the collection and some specific insights about materials there. I hope to give you examples of how research is both ongoing and possible, and provide for you the next steps in the processing. I began my association with Bowen theory in 2001 when I took my first class in a master's program at Seton Hill University. The instructor was the Dr. Walter Smith, and from the minute he began to describe a way of thinking about families and the help based in Bowen theory, my attention was captured and my imagination stimulated. I was hooked, and I've been oriented toward Bowen theory since that day. I was fortunate to participate in the postgraduate training program, and from the moment I walked into the Bowen Center, I sensed an aliveness of the place, different than coming to a place of worship or a museum. This place felt like I had been invited into a laboratory, and I was joining a research expedition all at the same time. I was drawn to the bubbling of curiosity, the wonder and awe that pulsed, and the engagement of lively brains. Dr. Murray Bowen died on October 9th, 1990, my 18th birthday. I did not know him, and I will never have the opportunity to be with him physically. But at the Bowen Center, his thinking is alive and his presence is real. I think that persists today in the archive materials and in the relationships with other students of Bowen theory. This is the back entrance to the Georgetown Family Center and the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family. Like all natural systems, the relationship system through interlocking triangles keeps past challenges and adaptations alive in the present. My efforts would not be possible without the life energy invested by others. The most recent project at the Bowen Center builds on a robust history of preserving and making accessible learning resources at the Bowen Center. While it represents an important next step, it's not possible without the solid foundation built by others. The work builds on the tremendous care and stewardship of Dr. Bowen's materials by Ruth Riley Sager, Andrea Shera, Kathy Vlahos, Priscilla Friesen, Kimberly Capehart, Jessica Chen, Paulus Weber, Elizabeth Utschig, Marge Hoddle, Elaine Trogdon, Carrie Collier, and so many others, as well as the decades of life energy invested by members of the Bowen family. In reviewing the materials housed at the Bowen Center, it is obvious that a great deal of care, thought, and responsibility were exercised over many decades. The effort's been going on for over 50 years, and it will continue to unfold over time. The project intersects with important project of Dr. Joanne Bowen to review the contents of the Bowen Center Library and identify and separate materials representing Murray Bowen's intellectual property that were intermingled with the Bowen Center institutional materials. The process and methodology that I used attempt to integrate observation and learning from Catherine Rocco in the Williamsburg Collection Project, conversations and instruction from Dr. Joanne Bowen, and it aims to be theoretically consistent by focusing on the facts of functioning. Some principles that have guided the process echo what I believe are core ideas within the theory. Bowen theory and all the connected stuff that live in the Bowen Center are part of what I would think about as a common pool resource. They're not the property of one. Without ways of limiting the engagement of it, it can be exploited and lost. It requires careful stewardship, but doesn't need to rely on a heavy-handed hierarchy to manage and protect it. The responsibility for preservation and accessibility lies with many, although each of us will have different roles to play. Systems thinking. See this collection as part of a whole and work to use similar methodologies and techniques that have been used previously. The goal would be to strive for coherence and conversation between each of the elements within the archives, not to have separate and competing entities. Respect. The project's been in the making for decades and is a part of a multi-generational process. Make decisions that are biased to future access, and that access matters. Better to have some access than no access. And then finally, always strive to see differentiation of self at the core of the work. How does one define a way for being for self and continue to relate to others? So what did the work actually look like? The first thing required a multifaceted game of hidden object. The Bowen Center has over 12 offices, multiple closets. It contained 54 file drawers and closets and rooms with boxes and boxes and boxes of materials. The second stage was to organize and consolidate the materials. That meant to gather them. The next stage was to inventory and catalog. The goal in when things were boxed was to create a finding guide so that the box and its contents were recorded into a massive spreadsheet. And then the boxes then are labeled and correlated with the spreadsheet so you can find whatever box you're looking for. The next stage that has not been accomplished yet is steps toward preservation and accessibility.
Okay, it's me again. Here we are. This is a little office off of the main office at the Bowen Center. And in these files, we have things that are labeled generically center history. So I'm going to open up this drawer and show you what's in here. And you can see, well, if you put your glasses on like I needed to, you can see that these include documents that are budget summaries by month, sometimes by week, of the Bowen Center from its inception to kind of 2000. So my task today will be to move these files out of this file cabinet, create what's called a box level inventory, and then have each of the files labeled in the inventory. And then this will become a tool that I will explore.
So that video gives you a sense of kind of the denseness of each of these files. I think it demonstrates kind of beautifully the history of care and stewardship. And it gives you an idea of the opportunities. Some may be concerned that you go after budget statements to look for failures or challenges or ways people spent their money. What's kind of interesting when you review budgets over a period of time is you can see where people prioritized investments of resources. And you can also see then where there was demand for investment that couldn't be met. So it's just a way of capturing one thin thread of functional facts. The organizing effort was not a solo activity. It took place over 6 work days in the last year. 14 of 21 faculty members of the Bowen Center were represented. Since January 1 of 2023, over 1,000 hours of volunteer time have been contributed to this effort. Specific to the gathering and organizing effort, there was a very strong commitment to assure the physical safety and integrity of materials, to capture inventory of materials as they are gathered, to create a finding guide. It's no good to have a bunch of boxes and don't know what's in each box. That could be painful. To organize materials now in such a way that ongoing research efforts are more possible in the future, and ultimately to develop a comprehensive catalog of materials that the Bowen Center can be responsible for. The Bowen Center building sale evoked the need for further principles to guide this process. They included important to make sure the urgency of the move didn't shortchange the responsibility to and for the materials as important facts. How we gathered and organized laid foundation for future work. And to see the challenge of imminency as an opportunity to gather facts, a real-time understanding of what resources actually exist. And finally, to trust that there are many future opportunities to think about how to effectively engage these materials. So it's a vast and complex collection. These 3 images just give you a further sense of it's not just a file cabinet with 20 files. These are well-used resources. Every file cabinet had as much possible material stored in it. There are 61 boxes of print material. That's about 75 linear feet. 8 of those boxes are specific to direct outputs of Dr. Murray Bowen, and they lived in the library. At least another 15 boxes represent Dr. Bowen's influence, either directly in his own writing or in notes on other people's writings, correspondence between faculty and Dr. Bowen around particular program formation, notes on how to engage a speaker for a symposium. These are sprinkled throughout all of the boxes. So Dr. Bowen's work is represented here, and it's intermingled. It's not just easy to say, oh, this one box is Dr. Bowen's. In addition, there are boxes that contain materials after Dr. Bowen's death that demonstrate the ongoing emotional process alive in the thinking and planning, reacting and responding to the challenge of continuing Dr. Bowen's work. There are over 42 boxes of videos that range from original copies of symposiums to recorded tapes of meetings with Dr. Bowen. In many cases, these have not been previously identified, nor have they been reviewed or cataloged. I think the other thing I'd want to bring up here is that the collection represents different functional categories, but also different audiences and different purposes in the way Dr. Bowen was communicating and thinking about the theory, and that the different files represent different functional responsibilities. If you would think about it as different ways Dr. Bowen functioned as a leader based on the promises made and the hoped for dreams in his effort to bring the theory to science. And they present important opportunities for now and the future. The next several slides will give a few examples of the materials found. This one I thought was kind of funny in that I am still not sure on all of the facts, so I thought it was an important one. This one was labeled "In the Name of Accuracy," and it's an example of an internal memo. A few brochures have gone out this year listing the beginning of the Family Center as the fall of 1976. There are situations in which approximate accuracy is functionally okay, and others in which approximate accuracy is wrong. No great problem in the fall of 1976, but if we make a 23.3% error on one fact, do we also make it on others? One can muse about the source of the error. Was it in the head that did the rough draft, the typewriter that typed it, the slippage in the head of the typist, or the proofreader or the printer? The rent on 4380 began on Monday, November 24th, 1975, the day the 5-year lease began. The office furniture and files were moved from St. Mary's to 4380 on Tuesday, December 16th, 1975. The telephone at 4380 were finally operational on Thursday, December 16th, 1975, and on Friday, December 19th, 1975, Ruth, Doctors Park, and Tate, and MB moved physically to 4380, and Ruth began answering the telephone. It's just an example of how clear Dr. Bowen is, how committed he is to facts. There's a whole other paragraph in there talking about all of these details. Facts matter. This next one is an example of how Dr. Bowen is engaging the ongoing thinking and minds and imagination of students of Bowen theory, and also kind of thinking about how the role of students of Bowen theory intersects with the larger community of family therapy. So this is an invitation to the private professional day. This was held before the Georgetown Family Symposiums. It's from September 1983. The goal is to flood this small group of experts with new ideas on the frontiers of theory, teaching, and therapy, and to provide plenty of time for open, intimate discussion. This day has become one of our liveliest professional institutions at Georgetown. You are all doing important and exciting work in theory, science, research, and therapy. The day is designed for cross-fertilization at its best, when you can get feedback on your ideas and make contributions to others. This has been a year of tumultuous change in the family movement worldwide. The profession has gone on a family therapy binge with dozens of different techniques oriented more around the therapist than on facts and knowledge and science. You are all part of this world. The greater our grasp of family systems, theory, facts, the better we'll be able to cope with this ever-changing world of conflicting ideas and feelings. There are numerous others who would like to take your place. If you cannot attend, your early response will help us invite others. This private professional day promises something unusual. This is an example, I think, of Dr. Bowen's commitment to the theory remaining open. And that's very different than how Bowen and others have described and experienced the theory of Freud, which it became a self-referencing, self-fulfilling, and self-edifying way of thinking about the world. Dr. Bowen's commitment to an open theory and the constant invitation of his students to go and engage the sciences, learn about something new, but bring that learning back into the relationship system so that it will stimulate and invite new learning for others. He's not organizing a group effort. He's inviting each person to go and do their best thinking and engage and interact with the other. The next one, I think, comes to, there's a series of these letters. And this one's an internal memo. It's a change in format for a Wednesday meeting. So at first glance, you might read this and think, meetings change, memos get offered. But when you read deeper into it, this is an internal memo, and it's written January 30th, 1989. Dr. Bowen's got his eye on the future here with this letter. When teachers and supervisors are not completely sure of the theory, they automatically erode theory to fit popular mental health ideas. When the teachers are not sure, administrative people promptly follow the erosion or the teachers. Every person at the Family Center, from the director to the newest student, to every trainee in the program, are all part of a giant web work that can delay rational human thinking for generations or more. When any person in the system can be aware of the erosion, it is a step toward the Family Center always being a citadel of systems thinking. The focus on theory appears to be one answer. At its absolute optimum, theory and practice should be so well integrated that impersonal theory directs every step in therapy. A worthy theory has disciplined guesses about everything that's ever happened, that's happening now, or that will ever happen. A theory is never absolute or complete. An erosion breakdown begins when a busy practitioner is unaware of the knowledgeable variables in theory, and she begins to treat theory as a proven fact rather than a living thing that is constantly changing. When the theory is considered to be unchangeable, it is automatic for both theory and practice to be distorted to fit personal needs or the demands of professional or social practice. Everyone with an official or unofficial connection with the Family Center plays a part in the erosive process. It impairs the function of the Family Center. Every person in the building, professional or administrative, is part of the erosion. It is all part of the relationship process. When one person is more aware of their function as a leader, it can influence all of us. So again, it's a clear statement about what's important to Dr. Bowen. It is theoretically consistent. That consistency shows up no matter which letter you pick up. It is always, this is my thinking, what's your thinking? I think this also reaffirms the idea that the theory is an open theory. And it becomes closed when we start to treat it as if it's figured out and teach it only as it's been taught. The last thing represents kind of a more broad-based correspondence. This was the Family Center report, and it was published, it looks like 1979 to about 1999. Self-referencing facts matter. I don't know the facts of this. It was about 20 years. The first I thought was pretty cool because it's captures Dr. Bowen's reflections on 20 years at the Family Center. And he says there are three major areas of professional involvement in this 20 years at Georgetown. One deals with my own evolution and the development of the theory and therapy. The second deals with my relationship with Georgetown, the development of teaching and research programs, the evolution of the various symposia and meetings, the formalization of the structured postgraduate training program in 1969, and finally, the move to our off-campus Family Center in December of 1975. The third area deals with my participation in the family movement nationally and the part Georgetown has played on the national scene. It is impossible to clearly separate one area from the other. This report will focus primarily on the development of the theory and the therapy. And so then he goes on to track his own history of how the theory emerged. What's fun about this is Dr. Bowen may have had scheduled expectations for his next article, but Dr. Bowen was always going to do what Dr. Bowen thought best. And so volume 2, number 2, picks up where this one left off, and it was supposed to be 20 years at Georgetown, part 3. The editor's note says, Dr. Bowen will resume his series 20 years at Georgetown in the next issue of the Family Center report. And Dr. Bowen goes on to write, some clinical days provide feedback on things I had sort of forgotten. There was such a day in the spring of 1980 when someone in the audience placed too much importance on the kinesthetics of body posture, mannerisms, facial expressions, and other expressions of body language. I've been interested in this order of data for a long time. It is easily overinterpreted or misinterpreted. That is the subject of this clinical note. So in the Family Center report, which is a document that is a product of the Georgetown Family Center that Dr. Bowen authored, you find this really interesting research-worthy tracking of how Dr. Bowen engaged theoretically the idea of how does one communicate not just verbally, but also with their body. So moving forward, the 1990 and after collection, there's evidence of ongoing emotional process. I think it is actually people taking up the charge to continue to work on differentiation. This little video will give you a sense of it.
This particular section of information represents, I think, probably the most robust impact of Dr. Bowen and Dr. Bowen's theory, Bowen Family Systems theory, on the world. These are the postgraduate training program lectures from 1990 forward, where faculty who are serious students of Bowen theory have picked up and explored concepts, ideas, curiosities related to Bowen theory, and in the development of their own thinking, begin to work on differentiation of self And as that work is happening, it is engaging the differentiation of self of others.
So those videos have not been cataloged. They haven't even been viewed. Many of them are on, so the Bowen Center was always kind of on the front edge of technology. So they're on Betamax and mini VHSs. They're higher quality recordings, but it also makes quick, easy viewing and then listening to. So those are going to need to be digitized to be able to be reviewed or new equipment acquired. But that's the way to see how Bowen theories evolved over time, not just from Dr. Bowen, but in its transmission to students of Bowen theory. Bowen theory, the materials there provide fertile ground for research. I'm lifting up here Dr. Carrie Collier and Dr. Ashley Mader's work with materials between Dr. Bowen's correspondence, his professional letters. They have an article that's been submitted to the Australian New Zealand Journal of Family Therapy. What Dr. Collier identifies there is that the questions, the concepts are brought to the fore in Bowen's responses and in his voice. The results from this analysis reveal that Bowen's writings are grounded in the language of nature, and that Bowen's thinking about the human species and the family offers a way in which to see the family and humans as part of a larger system. So that's one example of what can be produced. The image here represents one of the artifacts that was living at the Bowen Center. These are just some other questions that have emerged over time. Spending any amount of time in the collection can stimulate thinking and bring curiosity forward. Why does this matter? What's the vision? On the left, you can see me sitting in the offices at 4400 MacArthur Boulevard just a couple of weeks ago, writing, thinking with Dr. Bowen. Preserving the archives isn't just about keeping something from the past whole. It's about activating the living relationship system through the materials so that it can live for our future. This is Sullivan, and the idea is that we're trying to put materials into the world so his great-grandchildren have access to Bowen theory and the thinking that it can produce to help humans adapt to the more and more significant challenges. And this gives you a picture of all the boxes in the storage room.
The walls are bare, and yet the presence lives on.
Thanks. I'll pass it now to Randy Frost.
Thank you, Amie Post. That was a really fine presentation. You know, like the archives we're trying to preserve, your talk really brought alive just the vibrancy of Dr. Bowen and his work. And so I want to thank you for that, and also for your work in organizing and beginning to process all these boxes that still are stored at 4400 MacArthur Boulevard. Boxes that store records that go back to the beginning of the Bowen Center in 1959, forward to the time Dr. Bowen died in 1990. One need only read Catherine Rocco's new book, Making Sense of Human Life, to realize how valuable Dr. Bowen's papers are to understanding better the man and his work. Over 30 years of that work is partially contained at the Bowen Center. He had the lofty vision. The Bowen Center itself was a kind of citadel to which people could return to experience a more accurate version of the theory. Part of his effort with himself and his faculty in the larger professional world can be found in the boxes Ms. Post is preparing for digitization and eventual transfer to the National Library of Medicine. The Bowen Center and the Murray Bowen Archives are separate and individual organizations. Each organization has its own vision and mission. But we also share common objectives about the importance of the theory and the value of reading in his own words how Dr. Bowen developed the theory, explained the theory, and tried to live the theory. I look forward to working with the Archives Project in the months and years ahead to preserve the records of Dr. Bowen and to make them available to current and future generations. Now, Mr. Kent Webb will fill you in on what the Archives Project has been up to of late.
Good evening. I've had the fortunate privilege to be vice president of the Murray Bowen Archives Project and the board of directors member since 2016. I'm also the Bowen Center's director of training and a faculty member. I've been a 40-year student of Bowen theory and had the good fortune of learning from him for 9 years. I took the opportunity to have this photo snap this past fall as the Bowen Center was packing for its move. I've aged, but Dr. Bowen continues to look pretty much the same and pretty darn good for being 111 years old today. On behalf of TMBAP, I'm honored to report on the state of the archives as we enter 2024. It's been a really busy quilting year, with many quilters stitching away. Approximately $92,000 in donations were received, and $40,000 was directed to fund 7 archival projects. With the National Library of Medicine deaccessioning clinical records and videotapes, TMBAP is moving full steam ahead with the selecting of legal counsel to advise us regarding privacy and third-party liability laws. Engaging with legal counsel will allow TMBAP to move forward with the knowledge and confidence that it will be able to post materials that are responsible and legal related to privacy and liability. As I hope you've noticed, TMBAP has a new communications logo and look. Both were archivally inspired. It was inspired by Dr. Bowen's signature recently discovered in a steno book in the Williamsburg collection. I believe the new logo and look reflects the evolving commitment the organization has to adapting to and moving forward with the times, from its visual presence to its sophistication, with such crucial items as privacy, liability, and technology. TMBAP's 2023 webinar was also held on Dr. Bowen's birthday, January 31st. The event was free for those who attended, but was still a major fundraising success thanks to our generous sponsors, Allison Whitney, John Kamak, Bill and Linda Dwyer. We thank them all again for ensuring that the work of the Archives Project continues. TMBAP has practiced its action and adaptation phrase this year by being flexible and nimble with the NLM deaccession. One result is the urgency to have principles, policies, and procedures that are legally informed. This knowledge will open the accessibility doors significantly to materials that have been difficult to access. Many institutions, museums, and individuals have not taken human subject archival materials or even deaccessioned them due to privacy and liability concerns. With TMBAP navigating these iceberg-filled waters, it will be able to develop a template and become a consulting resource to others as they engage with their materials. Is TMBAP and the archives about the past, present, or future? Well, of course, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. And the words in the vision and mission statements reflect the past, present, and future. TMBAP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was established in 2008 with the vision that Murray Bowen's archives will be available to the world to advance the understanding of his theory of human behavior, its development, and integration with the natural sciences. This almost all volunteer organization consistently works toward its mission of obtaining the resources necessary to fulfill the vision, to enhance advanced scholarship, and enhance public knowledge of Dr. Bowen's archives. Many volunteers and stakeholders contribute necessary resources such as money, time, thinking, and work to support the archives and the board, for which the board of directors is appreciative and grateful for these donated resources. TMBAP is a financial resource for entities needing assistance with the costs of preserving, processing, and making accessible Dr. Bowen's archives. The owners of Dr. Bowen's original works who may utilize financial resources are the National Library of Medicine, the Bowen family, the Bowen Center, Andrea Shera, and the Bowen family. Our website is a portal for the world to have knowledge of Dr. Bowen's archives and view useful examples of archival materials from letters to videotapes. Please visit the website to become acquainted with its rich materials. Now let's take a closer look at the state of the archives, accomplishments made in 2023, and the opportunities that lie ahead for 2024. In 2023, the organization funded 7 projects totaling $40,193.31. Sorry about that. My cursor has stuck here, so give me just a second. There we go. I'll get back here. $6,472.29 was spent cataloging the Bowen Center Library, where the contents of the Bowen Center's library were documented. This project included the creation of a research tool that will enable researchers to search within the books and journals in the library without having to physically open the book. $2,655 was spent on phase 2 of the Andrea Shera photograph collection, and it's been digitized. The second batch of photographs was discovered by Andrea Shera this last year, and they have now been added to her overall collection. We're currently in the process of making this collection searchable. $11,855 was spent on the Bowen Center separation project that successfully separated Dr. Bowen's personal intellectual property that he and Mrs. Bowen brought to the Bowen Center for educational purposes from other materials that were housed at the Bowen Center. These materials are now incorporated into Dr. Bowen's professional papers in Williamsburg. $16,892 was directed to the Williamsburg Collection Assessment and Storage Project, which completed separating Dr. Bowen's professional records from his military records, from objects and family papers, and it created a system to store and retrieve materials. Boxes were numbered, contents recorded in Excel, and then stored in designated spaces in a climate-controlled facility. Planning efforts are now underway to restore and preserve Dr. Bowen's medical bag and the chalkboard he used in his home office. $2,224.52 was spent on the National Library of Medicine de-accession project. The money was spent for transportation, labor, and storage of materials. We successfully initiated a response to the National Library of Medicine's decision to de-accession all clinical papers and videotapes from the L. Murray Bowen collection. Until now, TMBAP had functioned with the long-term expectation that the archives would be housed and accessible at the National Library of Medicine. Obviously, their decision alters that expectation for these clinical records. We will further discuss the implications of this going forward. $94.50 was spent on the oral history project for transcription of audio tape. $1,300 was spent on the metadata pilot project, phase 1. In this past year, TMBAP began building a searchable list of key terms related to Bowen theory and concepts that will facilitate more robust searches of archive materials. Phase 1 of this project focused on a small collection of professional correspondence housed in Williamsburg. Learnings from this pilot will then be used to develop additional metadata search terms for other parts of the archives collection. As you saw earlier, this is the actual chalkboard that Dr. Bowen used in his home office and is a part of the Williamsburg collection. TMBAP is assisting the financial costs of having it restored. I hope you've noticed, as I said earlier, that TMBAP has a new communications logo and look. Dr. Bowen's initials were recently discovered in the Williamsburg collection. Significant thought and creativity went into creating and adopting this new logo. Many thanks to Teresa Edmondson for leading the effort, and to Dr. Joanne Bowen for locating Dr. Bowen's initials in the archival collection. Refreshing, the TMBAP look and logo has truly been a collaborative effort that included the TMBAP board as well as multiple members of the Bowen family. Many had a hand in the final outcome, and for that, we are grateful. A short video was put together that lays out the reasons behind this logo refresh, and that gives you a behind-the-scenes peek into the thinking and the creativity that went into this effort. We hope you enjoy it. Go ahead and roll the video, Elise.
The work of the Murray Bowen Archives Project continues to evolve. And this short video offers a behind-the-scenes look at why and how our look and our logo have undergone a refresh as well. We are very grateful to the Bowen family for their gift of the Bowen bookplate logo made to TMBAP in 2015.
The bookplate that we chose early on sort of reflected where the organization was at the time.
Dr. Bowen's personal bookplate has served as a symbol of our vision and our mission to make the archives accessible to the world. The bookplate image will continue to have a presence on the Bowen website and will always be memorialized as part of our history. At the same time, the realities of how people use technology today necessitated a simpler, more modern image that could gracefully transition across multiple platforms, including websites, apps, cell phone screens, and social media. The challenge as we saw it was to retain a sense of gravitas, science, history, and importance to the TMBAP logo, and at the same time, represent the continuing relevance of Dr. Bowen's work to a modern world. And perhaps to somehow capture Dr. Bowen's willingness to break away from the conventions of his day. We also wanted a visual identity that symbolized how Bowen theory and Dr. Bowen the man came together and are uniquely highlighted within the archives.
The voice is personal in the archives. that isn't as prominent in the rest of the world of Bowen theory.
Although the idea of using Dr. Bowen's initials as a possible logo had been proposed early on, it wasn't until Dr. Joanne Bowen suggested using her father's handwritten initials that the creative sparks began to fly.
It was my siblings that I consulted, and they all agreed that the initials were a viable way to represent our father, what we knew as the person and the theory that he created.
With the blessing of the Bowen siblings, Dr. Joanne Bowen provided a few examples of Dr. Bowen's handwritten initials to art director Jan Black, and the rest, as they say, is history.
The lettering of this logo highlights Murray Bowen, and the graphic is more personal.
The letter M that you see in the new logo is an actual replica of Dr. Bowen's handwriting.
The initials were a way to open the door to retaining the differentiation that existed within Murray Bowen himself.
The letter B, of course, represents the Bowen name. The square design that extends from the letter B is based on the iconography of the family diagrams, and the bar below is another nod to the family diagram and also helps to anchor the logo visually. The new color palette is based on Dr. Bowen's favorite color, blue, as well as the colors of nature, drawing a clear linkage to the natural world.
This logo is a wonderful invitation for people to go into the archives and discover the breadth of Dr. Bowen's brain and his ability to look at the earth and all the relationships that exist.
What the archives contributes is the breadth of a human being out of which a theory emerges. And I think that is powerful and dynamic in a way that this graphic expresses.
The Murray Bowen Archives Project has responded to the National Library of Medicine's recent deascensioning of Dr. Bowen's clinical notes, videotapes, and other archival materials with responsibility, creativity, and a sense of opportunity. We like to think of our new logo as a gentle nod to TMBAP's unwavering commitment to the future of Dr. Bowen's legacy and the importance of the archives. We at the Murray Bowen Archives Project remain more committed than ever to complete what has begun.
On September 5th, 2023, the National Library of Medicine informed the Bowen family and the Bowen Center they are deaccessioning all clinical paper and videotapes from the L. Murray Bowen collection. What this meant was that 27 boxes of clinical records and 515 clinical tapes have been officially removed from their listed holdings. NLM has decided to no longer accept clinical collections or any collection of human subject research. This policy is a response to the ever-increasing privacy concerns stemming from societal pressures and governmental guidelines around privacy, such as HIPAA. This did not come as a complete surprise to us, as archival repositories such as libraries and museums around the country are dealing with difficulties surrounding digitizing personal collections due to privacy and liability concerns. Fortunately, TMBAP was already engaged in resolving liability questions surrounding human subject information, and efforts to digitize Bowen's personal correspondence were already underway. However, TMBAP is nimble and quick, and we're seizing the opportunity and the moment to move forward with some degree of urgency by engaging legal counsel to address privacy and liability concerns for the sole purpose of making the archives accessible in reasonable timeframes. TMBAP fully recognizes that it now has an amazing opportunity to lead the way for addressing and resolving privacy and liability issues related to human subject archival collections. TMBAP has been in the position of waiting for other entities to address and resolve these problems. However, with NLM deaccessioning clinical records and videotapes and returning them to their owners, the Bowen family and the Bowen Center, TMBAP can move independently to seek solutions for these returned archival materials. TMBAP acknowledges it now has a legal life to live, as well as an archival one. Each life is critical to Dr. Bowen's archives being redacted and digitized in ways to ensure privacy and avoid liability. Opportunities ahead. We have the opportunity to create a template as well to be a consultation resource regarding privacy and liability protection that might be used by other entities and their archival materials. The website will be able to post new correspondence, family letters, and clinical correspondence with legally informed redaction methods. I wish to thank several people this evening, and we'll begin with Mr. Randy Frost, Director of the Bowen Center. I want to thank Mr. Frost and the Bowen Center for their commitment to the archives and for utilizing TMBAP's resources. As well, I want to thank Ms. Amie Post and Ms. Priscilla Friesen for their archival work and thinking associated with the Bowen Center materials. TMBAP values its cooperative relationship with the Bowen Center. And as Mr. Frost pointed out earlier, both organizations are separate and independent with several mutual interests and objectives. Thank you is extended to the Bowen family for its continued connection and commitment to the Murray Bowen Archives Project. The partnership with the Bowen family is critical and an important one for the preservation, processing, and making the archives accessible. Dr. Joanne Bowen deserves many thanks for her remarkable, steadfast involvement with the archives and with the organization that she helped begin. In addition to being its first president, she continues to serve as a board member and is the Bowen family representative to the board. She offers important, irreplaceable consultation to the board regarding archival processes, which is essential. Our thanks to the National Library of Medicine for preserving Dr. Bowen's records for future generations. We thank them as well for the cooperation with the return of Dr. Bowen's clinical records, and we look forward to working with curators to preserve Dr. Bowen's legacy for the future. I want to acknowledge appreciation to all the researchers who have engaged with the archives, and a hats off to those who published using archival materials. And of course, a heartfelt thank you to all our stakeholders, our volunteers, and our board of directors. The progress being made is due to your generosity and to your commitment to Bowen theory and to Dr. Bowen's life works. Having them accessible is critical for our present and future lives, as Ms. Amie Post pointed out in her slide. With that said, I'm going to turn the rest of our evening over to Dr. Libby Malone, our organization secretary. She does an amazing job of taking minutes of our meetings and retreats. No easy feat, because there's a lot of talking that takes place. Can you even imagine that? Libby.
Thank you so much, Kent. I'd like to take a moment here to say thank you to all of our presenters, especially Mr. Randy Frost for his effort in joining us. I want to take a moment also to pause here and let people, if they want to gather some thoughts, maybe it stirred some thinking our discussion today, and to send some questions to me. And I'm in Dr. Libby Malone of his questions in parentheses to me, so feel free to keep those coming in. I really appreciate how our presenters today articulated all the different very important parts of the quilt of Murray Bowen's life and his effort. One question I have, and I'll pose this to Priscilla Friesen, is what is currently available for researchers of the archival work that people can access?
What is available at National Library of Medicine is you actually develop a proposal that you would want to be a researcher for the materials. And now that the clinical materials are gone, the collection is basically available for anyone who is kind of signs up to do the research. The same is true actually for the videotapes. If you're interested in the videotapes, there are no clinical videotapes there now. They're all tapes of Dr. Bowen's teaching and research, classroom teaching kind of thing, that you can ask for what the videotapes that you're interested in, and you do go to the library and the reading room and have access to see them there. It takes a little bit more effort, and you have to go to the National Library of Medicine, but it is possible now to actually have access to some of the materials that are there.
Thank you so much for that. Another question we have is, do we plan to digitize the archives? And if so, what's the timeline for that and how can they be accessed?
I think this question might go to either Kent or myself, perhaps. I think there are a couple of steps. The digitizing is kind of a second step to the initial processing first. At least that's the way we're thinking of it at this point. So we're moving towards digitizing after the initial processing is proceeding, and we are in that. I don't know what I would say. I would have said this would have happened a lot earlier than it is now, but their time is always of the essence. I think that there is the Williamsburg collection that is getting clearer and clearer, that will be completed in their assessment and their organization. And I think Ms. Post is also aiming for this. We're closer to proposing to having the processing done, which we would likely have done by a professional organization. And included in that would be the next step of the digitizing. So we are closer than we've ever been, let me say. And the first collections would likely be the Bowen Center collection, which is probably the most available first, and then Williamsburg collection. And then we would be working also with NLM. So we're kind of right at the stage of really developing these proposals for what it really looks, what does it really take to process these collections, and what is the cost of them. So this is where we are kind of at in the next year or so. Maybe Kent would like to say something as well, or Amie.
The only thing I will add to what Ms. Friesen has said is that's the opportunity that TMBAP has in its lap at the moment, is being able to engage with and secure the legal consultation that will allow for these materials to be redacted and protective of others' personal privacy and their personal information, as well as protecting others in terms of liability. We have the opportunity to have this consultation within this year, and that will then allow for the processes to occur that would ensure privacy, ensure protection from liability, and then begin to make the materials accessible.
Thank you for that. It's very exciting times. There's other questions related to accessing the archives. One question we have is there any information currently available via the internet? And if so, how can they be accessed? I think I'm going to ask that of Amie, and maybe to speak about our website as one resource on the internet.
Well, like Libby just said, one resource that is available is the Murray Bowen Archives project website, and that has several elements of the collection available, including the oral history project, which gives you contact with folks who knew Dr. Bowen and Dr. Bowen's thinking. There are pictures and images both from the Andrea Shera collection and also the family photo collection. There's a comprehensive life history of Dr. Bowen to help you see the man, the context, and the environment in which his brain was cooking and producing this great theory. So that would be one place. There is not a general repository of Bowen material as at its broadest level, but that is one of those things that can be produced as we continue to work through the privacy issues and then get the professional help to expedite the processing and the digitization process.
We have another question here about other materials from Dr. Bowen. So are Dr. Bowen's teaching videos from other centers, such as the Western Pennsylvania Family Center, being archived? And I'll ask that of Priscilla.
Ooh, that's a great question. There's a lot of talk about it. We are in conversation with more informally with individuals that do have materials. I know Mr. Frost's Living Systems in Vancouver are working on theirs. So I'd just like to put a plug in for that. I think this is something that is important, and I think having access to this whole entire network of materials is an important step for all these places that will take some responsibility for the archiving of the materials that they've produced. And hopefully, and I think we're aiming that somehow these are interrelated in a way that they are accessible in a network sort of kind of way. That's the aim. That's a good question. Very good question.
I also have a comment from someone familiar with this, from Catherine Rocco, who says that Dr. Bowen's presentation in Pittsburgh are available at the Western Pennsylvania Family Center as well as NLM, where they are on loan. Hopefully that's helpful for the person who asked the question. I have two other questions I'd like for us to get to if we have time for it. The first is, are any materials at the Bowen Center accessible to researchers? And if so, how would one gain access?
Yeah, I can speak to that right now. Just given the situation with the renting of the rooms in a larger organization, access to the actual building is limited. And until the processing has been done more completely in terms of the inventory and the catalog, it's going to be disruptive to that processing process to begin to have researchers coming in right now. My hunch is that we can do this sooner than later, but it's going to require the resources to support the processing so we can move it forward more swiftly.
Thank you all again for all these amazing questions. The last one I'm going to direct to Kent, which is, what are the ways in which individuals can assist with our efforts?
Well, that's a great question. And the best way for people to direct their interest would be to any of the board members. But what might be even a more organized approach would be to direct your interest and your questions to Elise Steenberg, our Director of Operations. So I think she can, I think she indicated what her email address is, or Elise, you might want to remind people what it is in case they would like to reach out to you.
I'll stick it in the chat right now.
Okay. Elise is so organized and on top of things that you'll get the best response from her.
Thank you, everyone, for all your wonderful questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Jake Morrill.
Thanks, Libby. In closing, I want to share a risk in this evening's webinar. Typically, this webinar has been a fundraising event, whether charging for registration, asking directly for gifts, or gratefully receiving underwriting from generous stakeholders like last year. This year, as TMBAP gains momentum, resources will be needed not only to make possible its ongoing operations, but also to bring to fruition important projects, some of which you've heard about tonight. But tonight, I'm not asking you to make a gift of $50 or $500, and that's the risk. Instead, I'm asking you to consider your own long-haul part and responsibility in the vision of the archives being accessible to the generations to come. Your clarity about that part and responsibility means that in the coming months, when TMBAP does approach you, asking your support, you will respond not as an ATM, but as a committed partner, ready to play your part in a way that you have thought about. So until then, this brings this evening's program to an end. Good night.